part 4 of our studies of Rabbi Yitzchak's book, Transforming Darkness into Light. That's what we all want to do. Right. So we actually got 6 pages into it last week, but we're just going to review from the beginning just so we're all on the same page, so to speak. So the first page is 27. I'm just going to give a little summary. So Hachna'ah, this chapter 4 is on Hachna'ah. And Hachna'ah is rectifying the ego, submission, suppressing anxiety is the example of what we're going to. Remember that annoying anxiety that comes up from time to time. Okay, so we could say, how do you suppress anxiety? Do you tackle it on hand and tell the person it's not such a big deal? ... No, because that will create resistance. What we want to do is lower the ego. Lowering the ego will lower the anxiety. That's very important. If you're taking notes, write that down. Because obsession over an anxiety inflates the ego. And we all know how easy it is to drive ourselves crazy in that pattern. So it's actually, we're stuck with having to neutralize the ego. There's no other way. So, okay, so the bottom of page 27 says, the greater we feel we are, the more we think we deserve. The more we think we deserve, the more we will be agitated by the lack of what we think we should have. So we spoke about that, known as Yiddish as es kommt mir. It's very boring, self-defeating, never works out. How I want to grow, for example, is a much better thought pattern than how my es kommt mir is not working out. Okay, so let's see. How do we neutralize the ego? That is the question that the sages have asked for many years. So the 2 options that were asked, the Maggid of Mezerich, as we said last time, his two holy students, Rabbi Elimelech of Lizhinsk and Rabbi Zusha of Anapoli, 2 holy brothers, asked the Maggid about this, making the ego smaller. And should we start by looking at our flaws, otherwise known as the smallness of man, or should we start by looking at the greatness of God? And he said, well, the people in the past might have been able to do our flaws, but for our generations, we need the greatness of God. So we're going to speak about meditating on the greatness of God, because if we just look at our flaws, we could get into a bad mood. And we know the Alter Rebbe says, if we're in a bad mood, we cannot serve Hashem b'simcha. Yes, and we have to serve Hashem b'simcha. So, okay, so how do we do it? So we can only begin to look at our flaws as much as we are aware of Hashem's mercy. In other words, this whole business of shiftless, of making the ego smaller, all that space that was filled with the ego is now filled with Hashem's rachamim. Now, doesn't that feel better? Let's just feel Hashem's rachamim, filling all that space. It's like a vacation. It's like snorkeling in Eilat. L'chaim, l'chaim, l'chaim. So when we have this backdrop of Hashem's rachamim, then we can safely look at our flaws. Only then. So please make sure, I want everyone to be very careful. No looking at flaws till we feel the backdrop of Hashem's rachamim. Okay, it says the importance of the awareness of Hashem's rachamim cannot be overemphasized. We are allowed to examine our own shortcomings only in proportion to how conscious we are of Hashem's rachamim. That's page 29. So that's the story. So it's again, the sages of the Kabbalah say you have to have constant awareness of Hashem's rachamim, and then we can face our fears. Face our faults fearlessly. And we all want to face our faults fearlessly. We can only do that when we have the backdrop of Hashem's rachamim. Objectively. And it says here on the top of 30, maintaining equilibrium between these 2 complementary states of awareness is the basis of our relationship with Hashem. So on one hand, we have to feel Hashem's rachamim. On the other hand, facing our flaws objectively. Those 2 things. So those So and it's always changing. So that balance, that's a very good equilibrium to work in. And plus, it seems so important for us to remember Hashem's rachamim, that we're just bathing in this ocean of Hashem's rachamim. We mustn't forget that. We mustn't let life, because life, this is how, go down here. This is the next part here. So we spoke about 9 stages because Hachna'ah, Havdalah, and Hamtakah, submission, separation, and sweetening all have the other 3 in them. So it's really 9 stages. 3 times 3 is 9. And the first one is Hachna'ah, submission within submission. We spoke about this last time. It's beginning to meditate on Hashem's infinite greatness. And because there's a lot of facets to it, we don't have to be bored in our meditation. And the first part of the meditation, this is a general meditation. It begins with the absolute nature of Hashem's existence. And there's nothing else besides him. And this is counterintuitive. This is counterintuitive because we tend to see, wait, I'm here, wait, hold on one second. When I hear it, it's after my voice. So. Would you close the door? The door's barking. Yes, we're just getting our Zoom lines up here. Yes, we won't want any dog barking, interrupting. Okay, so Hachna'ah within Hachna'ah, Hashem's infinite greatness, the absolute nature of his existence, Ein Od Milvado. So this is the idea, in Shar, this is what's spoken about in Shar HaYichud V'Hamona. And we say, when we're davening Aleinu every day, when we're davening Aleinu, in the end of the first paragraph, there's a quote from Chumash, V'yadata hayom v'hashivosa el levavecha, and you shall know today, and this word v'hashivosa al levavecha, this hashivosa, we should place it on our hearts. We should go over it on our hearts. We should review it in our hearts. Like, this word is a very important word because we're talking about something that's counterintuitive, that there's only Hashem, there's only God. This is counterintuitive because we see all this kind of stuff around us and we're very aware of our own existence and thoughts that arise in our mind. And so this causes us to have to v'hashivosa al bavecha ein od milvado. We can't take it for granted. Like, I can say, yes, I believe. Do we believe that there's only Hashem? Let's say yes. We've been doing Shar HaYichud V'Hamuna in Tanya Chitas for 46 years. So, I think the Alter Rebbe is telling us the truth. I would say I believe it's true, but how much does it come into my day-to-day activity? Ein Od Milvado, how deeply? So that's the Hashivosa part that we say in Aleinu. Please note this week while we're saying it, that it means that we have to go over it and over it and over it. Ein Od Milvado. It's not something that we just, it's counterintuitive. Anything that's counterintuitive requires meditation. So this is still the general meditation. Ein Od Milvado, we're a creation. We're not that we are being created. That's a humbling thought. It's humble, being a creation that's being recreated each moment. It's very humbling. It means that I really can't, like on my own, nope, can't do it. Hashem has to recreate me each moment. It's a humbling thought. And this helps us in our Hachna'ah. The lowering of, this is the first part 1, rectifying the ego. Okay, so Hashem's infinity. And this thinking about Hashem's infinity has a humbling effect on our ego. It's not our fault. It just happens to be the facts of life that we're a creation. We have to make the most of it. Okay, so that's the general meditation of Hachna'ah within Hachna'ah. Then we get to something that's a few more pages. Separation within submission, the Havdalah that's within Hachna'ah. So although the general meditation is a blow to the ego, we haven't rooted it out at its source because we need a more profound meditation. We need more details. And then we come to the conclusion, we're brought to the conclusion, why can't we have this detailed meditation? What goes wrong is that our ego pops up and wants us to think about it. Okay, so only detailed and thorough meditation will help us transcend our self-awareness, be entirely absorbed in our experience of the truth. Because we do have a place where we really want to know the truth. That's where we are today. We want to know the truth. And the truth's inner depth and essence. So this takes detailed contemplation. It will illuminate what we've learned from the more general meditation. Now here's a good paragraph on page 32. Furthermore, when we contemplate a divine truth in detail, we will begin to adopt its inherent perspective on reality to gradually rewire the circuitry of our mind according to our enlightened awareness. Now that sentence is probably good for a few Farbrengens. So we want to rewire the circuitry of our mind. Now, that's what it comes down to. We were hoping maybe we could just, maybe it wouldn't take a total rewiring. Maybe I could just get a new light bulb somewhere. Nope, total rewiring of the circuitry of our mind. And this forges new ways of thinking. Aha, rewire the circuitry. You will have new ways of thinking that will in time profoundly affect our emotional and behavioral responses to life. This is another few weeks of Farbrengens, that a new way of thinking will profoundly affect our emotional and behavioral responses to life. We want to change them, right? We're tired of reacting in some mindless manner time and time again. And so we want to change our emotional and behavior responses. This requires new ways of thinking. New ways of thinking requires that we spend time on this meditation. Okay, so we're almost up to where we got to last Sunday. Our review is almost over. It's just, again, to continue on page 32. Nevertheless, when we are suffering from some psychological malaise or anxiety, we are only capable at first of a general contemplation. In other words, we can't do it for, how long can we do it? And at the beginning, everyone can do it for 30 seconds. Like we can think, Hashem is creating me, Ein Od Milvado, there's only God. I mean, we can do it for 30 seconds, and we must. But this is a brief, this will not cure our psychological malaise. It'll help us forget about it for 30 seconds, which is a good little vacation. But we need deeper meditation in order to overcome our psychological malaise or anxiety. And we're only capable at first of a general contemplation. Why? Our preoccupation with our own problems does not allow us the peace or presence of mind to concentrate on the details of anything other than our own painful situation. I shouldn't laugh. I mean, it is boring contemplating our own painful situation. How many years can I go on contemplating my painful situation? I don't know why I'm laughing. I have a strange sense of humor. L'chaim, l'chaim, that we should all as a group decide that we're going to cut down on the time we contemplate our own painful situation and spend more time thinking about Hashem. L'chaim, l'chaim. Life, this is definitely worthwhile rewiring the circuitry of our mind. When we're doing it as a group, a lovely group, doing it together makes it more fun. Okay, so what were we saying? So this preoccupation with our own problems. Okay, so this is the last paragraph we did last Sunday. To realize this limitation is itself a humbling experience, for it awakens us to the extent to which our ego has crippled our capacities of perception and abstract thought. So this is very humbling. Even though I would like to blame childhood traumatic experiences or somebody else for my problems, but it's actually the ego that has crippled our capacities of perception and abstract thought. Okay, so that's actually very hopeful. That's very hopeful because it means that I can do something about it. I don't need anything in my external reality to change. It means that I can do something about what was that problem, my ego crippling my capacity of perception and abstract thought. There is hope. It's me, it's my ego that's doing it. I don't have to do it. I've been doing it for a long time. I'm finding it quite tiring, and we don't have to do it anymore. Okay, we're going to learn how not to do it. We're going to learn how to, so that involves deeper meditation. So this is the, you know, we have to, so in other words, we do have to work on it. We have to work on it. It's interesting to see how long can I think about Hashem without getting distracted by my, you know, my ego wanting to turn back to myself and my problems. How long can I do? We should know, you know, we could have, should be an app on our phone, check it off, like running those miles, those kilometers. We can share it with our WhatsApp groups. There should be a WhatsApp group. That would be a fun WhatsApp group. How many minutes can I think about Hashem in one? And we can inspire each other second by second. Yes. Okay. So now we're up to new material. Okay, so chapter 33, for those who have, lucky enough to have the book. This is where, okay. General contemplation is therefore an admission of our ego's hold over us, which is an experience of hachna'ah. So that in itself is hachna'ah. So that's at the beginning. You want hachna'ah is realizing the ego's hold on us. And it's the ego that's holding us back in our meditation on the greatness of God. Just that's an experience of hachna'ah. That's hachna'ah within hachna'ah. So as we engage in this general form of contemplation, we will gradually be liberated from our limiting self-consciousness. We will then be ready to progress to a more detailed and elaborate meditation on the absolute reality of God and its implication in our lives. And here's a very important next sentence. Since such detailed contemplation requires us to be detached from the constraints of our psychological problems, it is the second subphase of the overall process of hachna'ah. Separation, havdalah, within hachna'ah. So let's go over what this is saying. It's saying this more detailed and deliberate meditation on the absolute reality of God and its implication in our lives. So such detailed contemplation requires us to be detached from the constraints of our psychological problems. So here is an important piece of information to put into the what is it, the little box with Band-Aids and whatnot, the first aid box, that being detached, that's the havdalah from the constraints of our psychological problems, that we have the ability to step out and look at them objectively. This is tremendously liberating. How do we have the ability to step out and look at our psychological problems objectively? Because we've already made them smaller. That's the hachna'ah. That's the hachna'ah within hachna'ah. The general contemplation makes it smaller. Once it's smaller, it's not my problems and me are not filling my whole consciousness. I've made it smaller. I can step outside and look at it objectively. Look at it objectively. So I could look at my problems objectively, even for a moment. This is the separation. This gives us the ability to separate from our problems. I mean, it's good to be able, don't worry, the problems will come back. We shouldn't think if we separate from problems, that they'll just drift off and we won't be able to tend to them. No, but it is an important vacation. We can't be spending all our identity. My identity is my problems. We have a deeper identity. We have a divine soul. We want that to be more of our identity. And to be able to look at our problems objectively, it helps. Then we could speak to a friend about them, speak to a mentor, etc. Okay, so again, detailed contemplation of the greatness of God requires us to be detached from the constraints of our psychological problems. So this is step 2 of the 9 steps. Havdalah within hachna'ah, so stepping out of our problems. So we already have 2 steps that we've learned. We've learned We have learned the first step, making our problems smaller. Step one, hachna'ah. And step two, stepping outside of our problems and looking at them objectively. Let's look at them. It could be it's a real problem, but let's look at it objectively. Let's look at it objectively rather than subjectively, that it's taking over my life and this is what I'm thinking about all the time. Okay, so we're continuing. It's saying a little, it's going to tell us a little bit more about this business of separation, Havdalah within Hachna'ah. It's in the middle of page 33. Detailed contemplation of the absolute reality of God and the tenuous nature of creation means examining the implications, ramifications, and applications of these truths in all aspects of our lives. As the awareness of Hashem's reality permeates our consciousness, we become increasingly aware of how much of our lives contravene this awareness. In other words, now we're thinking about awareness of Hashem's presence. I'm thinking about Hashem is present right here in this room, or in all of our rooms, wherever we are, Hashem is present. Like feeling Hashem's presence, I do feel I can breathe in more deeply. It's a good feeling. It's not just Hefkervelt. We're actually in Hashem's presence. But how much of that permeates our life? So the more we're aware of it, the more we want it, the more we thirst for it. It's you know, so we want to have this yearning to be in Hashem's presence. And how much of the time we just forget about it? We forget about Hashem. We forget about Hashem. We want to make that time, and we get totally, carried away by our problems and our anxieties. So we want to bring Hashem. Just talking about it now together, all of us gathered together here. It's a nice little group of people here. Can everyone just put on their camera for one moment and wave? I need that reassurance. That thank you, much appreciated. And if you leave your camera on, you get extra credit at the end of the class when I'm going to give out stars, most rectified ego. Why am I laughing? I have a strange sense of humor. The most rectified ego. Come, our families will be so proud. The most rectified ego prize, yes. Okay, so thank you. Now I have a few more. It gives that human touch when you're teaching. It's really a huge thing. Zoom, thank Hashem for Zoom. And we're in the privacy of our homes. You can choose whether you have your socks on or off. No one will know. You can feel the cool tiles underneath your feet. Okay.
I want to win. I'll put it on my fridge.
Okay,
I'll put the star on me.
Good. All right. So Hashem's awareness permeating reality. Okay, now here, and it's, again, since it's counterintuitive, we have to meditate on it. So let's just do a little more, and then at the end, I can see there's some excited questions that are going to be asked, but let's just wait till we get up to that certain magic point. Okay, so the bottom of page 33. Furthermore, once we come to realize, even in a general way, that Hashem is everything, and we are insignificant in comparison, we are ready to consider that Hashem has a plan and purpose for creation, hashgacha pratis, that supersedes any ideas that we may have entertained as to what life and reality should be. So one of the things that I found in Torah HaNefesh that was hard to grasp, really, is that all the circumstances of our life are hashgacha pratis, that Hashem has sent us in order to rectify the ego, that all of the circumstances of our life, that they're all here for us. They're all here for us, that Hashem went to the trouble of arranging all the circumstances of our life, that they're all hashgacha pratis, because Hashem has a plan and purpose for creation. And for us to do our mission, we all have a shlichus from Hashem. We had to have those circumstances. Those circumstances were essential for our shlichus. So to consider that, it's really life-changing to consider. That means there were no mistakes. That means everything in my life is for a purpose, for Hashem's purpose for creation. He says this supersedes any ideas we may have entertained. So God's ideals become the yardstick against which all is measured and evaluated. Sensing the implications of the absoluteness of Hashem's reality, we begin to evaluate how does our behavior measure up. So it is different. I mean, if we have this awareness of Hashem's presence, our behavior will be different. I mean, it's just, but we lose it. We have to all daven together in our little support group here, that we should have it. We should strengthen our sense of Hashem, that Hashem's reality, Hashem's presence. Hashem has a plan for creation. How does our behavior measure up? Do we conduct our lives loving, fearing, and esteeming God, or a whole pantheon of lesser deities, namely the ego? Okay, so we're turning the page. We have turned the page. At some level, we all know that we possess an animal soul that is a repository of selfish urges and drives. So, and we generally like to identify, so though we might try to, in other words, it's very hard not to identify with the animal soul unless we consciously decide that we want to identify with the divine soul, that we want to step into the consciousness of the divine soul, that we want to ask the divine soul, what does she think I should do right now? What's the opinion of my divine soul? Because otherwise, even if someone is born into a frum family and has all those benefits, the first identity is the animal soul. We have to note that by the way, it has selfish urges and drives. But a candid self-assessment will show that we unwittingly identify with the animal soul. You know, they speak in science about the reptilian brain. It's just looking for pleasure. I mean, it's this cute little reptilian brain, but it needs to be rectified. We have to rectify the animal soul, the reptilian brain, the ego, because it says, as this paragraph ends, much of the time we consider its perspective and aspirations to be our own. It takes conscious effort that we want to identify with the divine soul and not the animal soul. While contemplating the greatness of God in general brings us to awareness of our own insignificance, contemplating it in detail brings us further to the awareness of our own baser drives, and that we're no better than anyone else. So this idea, this idea that we're no better than anyone else, the Alter Rebbe devotes a whole chapter 30 of Tanya, on the chapter. It begins with a quote from Pirkei Avos about to be humble before every person, to be humble before every person. And the Alter Rebbe says right after that quote, even Kal Sheva Kalim, even the lowest of the low. And then the Alter Rebbe adds the word mamish. So he's not kidding around here. I think we said before that till the Alter Rebbe, it was considered enough to speak humbly to people, to act humbly. But the Alter Rebbe wanted panemius. He wanted panemius. So he gave us a guide. He told us how to do it. How do we, in truth, in a panemius level, feel humble before the lowest of the low? So the Alter Rebbe gives another quote from Pirkei Avos: don't judge somebody till you've walked a mile in their shoes. So when we walk a mile in the shoes, we walk the lowest of the low, we see what their tests are. We see what their tests are and how much effort it would take to not give into those tests. We can feel what effort it would take. And when we feel what effort it would take, the lowest of the low, not to give in, the Alter Rebbe says we have to ask ourselves, am I putting this much effort into my doing good? And it's easy to see that I'm not. I mean, I'm not putting the effort that the lowest of the low would have to put in. And then the Alter Rebbe goes further. And he says, are you putting that much effort into refraining from bad? So that's humbling. No, I'm not putting in that much effort. So this is how we can feel humble, mamish, before the lowest of the low, by walking in their shoes. Now let's say there's someone that we meet and we don't want to walk in their shoes. Like, did you ever feel like I couldn't bear it? I couldn't bear their suffering. I couldn't bear their pain. I can't walk a mile in their shoes. So then the Alter Rebbe says, then don't judge them. Don't judge them. So that's choice 2. Isn't that interesting? We would have thought don't judge is choice 1. No, choice 1 is walk a mile in someone's shoes and see what their tests are. And see how we're not putting in the energy they would have to put in. So how can we feel better than them? There's no reason to. He's just proven it to us. But if we don't want, don't judge. So that's the beautiful lesson of chapter 30 in Tanya. And that's what Rav Yitzchak is saying here, that the greatness of God can help us see where, where we're not really better than other people. Okay, it's such a relief not having to be better than other people. It's so exhausting trying to be better than other people. Isn't that a relief? No one has to spend any boring time trying to be better than other people. We can give that up completely. Yay. Okay. So now that we can examine our faults and shortcomings, which have been expressing themselves in our anxieties and fears. Now that's another blow to the ego. My anxieties or fears are an expression of my faults and shortcomings. Well, now we know where they're coming from. As we review them one by one, the absoluteness of our existential insignificance is driven home more and more graphically, although we cannot, at least to this point, pinpoint the direct correlation between specific faults and specific anxieties. This process deals yet another blow to the ego. Now, I want to say something that we said in the beginning, before in chapter 4, that these blows to the ego are totally different subject than low self-esteem. Low self-esteem is the same as high self-esteem. I'm thinking about myself. If I'm thinking about myself, my ego is expressing itself. So a blow to the ego doesn't mean, I want to make sure this should be totally clear to everyone, that a blow to the ego does not mean low self-esteem. Low self-esteem is just, it's an ego trip. I'm thinking about myself and my low self-esteem. But it means lowering the ego, which means making it easy to move the ego aside and think about the greatness of God for another few seconds. We want to move, because if the ego is entrenched, it's very hard to move it aside and have to hold it aside while I think about the greatness of God. But it's good exercise, right? Push that ego. Maybe we could make, Rabbi Yitzchak actually is, when I remember living in Crown Heights, there was all kinds of movements. I think we have to make a movement. I'm going to have to consult with him on a movement for pushing the ego aside. Good exercise. Okay. So another blow to the ego is lowering the ego, making room for Hashem's Rahmanis, making room for Hashem. It's not low self-esteem. Everyone believes me. Okay. So we realize that we do not possess the intrinsic reality that Hashem possesses, but that our present psychological state is in fact an antithesis of that reality. Let me read this paragraph from the beginning. Earlier, contemplating the infinity of God led us to the conclusion that creation is insignificant and does not possess any independent existence. Now, however, when we contemplate our own shortcomings in all their graphic relief, we realize that not only do we not possess the intrinsic reality that Hashem possesses, but our present psychological state is in fact an antithesis of that reality. So why aren't we aware of Hashem's presence? It's just our present psychological state. Oh dear. That's our it's our present psychological state is an antithesis to Ein Od Milvado. So that's humbling. That's humbling, and there's a sense of humor about it, because there's hope. I think I've mentioned before that we learned in Torah Sanefesh that if you're going to be someone's advisor and counselor, you have to feel this person has a lot of hope. Otherwise, send them to someone else. I mean, there's no purpose. The whole purpose is to give someone hope that they can change, that they can grow, and to reconnect this neshama with Hashem. I mean, that's what psychological counseling is supposed to wind up, that a person feels the breath of life of being reconnected with Hashem. Yes, okay, so we said that, so we want to rectify our present psychological state so it's not the antithesis of Ein Od Milvado. So contrary to our earlier assumptions that we are blameless victims of some malevolent force or circumstance, this realization leads us to the shocking but logical conclusion that we have only ourselves to blame for our anxieties. The darker side of our personality, those myriad instances of egotistical denial of God that we now realize dominate our consciousness, naturally surfaces as the psychological or physical malaises that we feel. Okay, so let's go over here. So the idea is to avoid feeling like a victim. Feeling like a victim, the ego is very happy to feel like a victim, but it's just very egocentric. Let's actually, I think the second paragraph I'm going to read here on this subject. In this light, victimization, the temptation to see ourselves as victims of circumstance, family, or society, is essentially heresy. There's something deep. That's an important idea. This is heresy to think that we're victims of, look at of circumstance, family, or society is heresy. By taking victimization to its logical conclusion, we end up blaming God for everything. Or if we cannot reconcile our suffering with the existence of the benevolent God, denying his existence. So either we're blaming God for everything or we're denying his existence. True God runs the world and is therefore responsible for whatever unfortunate or fortunate circumstances we were born into. But this does not absolve us from personal responsibility. So this is the Torah HaNefesh approach. Rather than feeling like a victim, which is kind of a hopeless state, that we want to take personal responsibility for our psychological state and be filled with hope that with this wonderful support group that we have here, that we're going to be able to meditate longer on the greatness of God, and we're going to be able to put our psychological malaise into a perspective where we could step out of it and look at it. How fascinating. It's like going to the zoo. Let's see how my psychological malaise is doing today. Maybe it needs a snack. It's really been struggling lately, my psychological malaise. I think I'll have to have a little drink. L'chaim, l'chaim. Okay. Okay, so we understand. Okay, and then there's a whole thing that we will discuss later in the Sefer, free will versus hashgacha pratis. Free will is us taking responsibility, and hashgacha pratis is the circumstances of our life. The circumstances in this moment is not too bad. We're learning together and for bringing together. But the circumstances of our entire life, this was all hashgacha pratis, which should make us feel less alone and lonely, because it means Hashem was with us in all of those situations, that we were never alone. We were never alone. Hashem was with us. And so that's the hashgacha pratis. And then we have how we're going to, we want to be able to refine our responses to situations that come up. And this is what we're going to be doing together. Okay, so we have time for a little bit more of Rabbi Yitzchak's wisdom. Okay, so the sages teach that the load matches the camel and the reward is commensurate with the pain endured. Okay, so let's think about this. So this is Pirkei Avos for Israel. It was this week, chapter 5, line 21. In America, it's next week. It was a blow that we're not all doing the same Pirkei Avos together. But this week we're going to catch up in Parshas. They're going to catch up with us. I love when everyone's reading the same Parsh. Okay, that's just a little joy in life. So the sages teach the reward is commensurate with the pain endured. Everyone knows that one. And that means that Hashem knows our situations exactly. He knows what we're up against. That's why he forgives us when we ask for forgiveness immediately, because he knows what we're up against. He knows our struggles. We each have struggles, and he knows every little detail of our struggles. He forgives us whenever we ask, even if we've asked 100 times and 1,000 times, and each time, because he knows our struggles. He knows our thoughts. You know, Chaim Vital writes about the Arizal, that the Arizal could learn deep truths from the flicker of a candle flame and the sound of the wind in the trees, and that he knew the Arizal could look at a person and know the next that was going to arise in their mind. That's a pretty intimate connection he had with people. So Hashem also knows the next thought that's going to rise in our mind, and the thoughts that's in our mind. We're somehow like surrendering to that. And the thought is Hashem, since Ein Od Milvado. Like to be able to find, the Rebbe spoke about finding Hashem in the ego, that the ego also is a reflection of Hashem, Ein Od Milvado. The sense of I've always been here, it's a reflection of Hashem's essence. We have to look if we look deep in the ego, we'll even find Hashem there. Ein Od Milvado, we have to memorize it. Okay, so the reward is commensurate with the pain endured. Is important knowledge. We shouldn't think that we're being measured against other people. We're not being measured against other people at all. Everybody has their own situation. We're only being, as Reb Zusha said, we can only be measured against ourselves, how we're doing with all of our traumas and circumstances and challenges and everything. Hashem understands. So, in other words, the bottom of page 35, if divine providence places us in a life context that challenges us, this cannot serve as an excuse for surrendering or evading responsibility. Well, that's the good one. So Hashgacha Pratis has placed us in a life context that challenges us. I mean, that's true for most people, right? But this cannot serve as an excuse for surrendering or evading responsibility. So even though seems like, maybe I'd like to evade responsibility, blame somebody else. But no, it's saying that we can't use it as an excuse. We have to take responsibility for our reactions to life. We have to take, and we want to, and we will.